All right, guys, I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick, wet these lips. All right, welcome to PacWest Bigfoot. If you are not subscribed, get on over to PacWestBigfoot.com and subscribe for the monthly giveaway. As a matter of fact, today is December 21st, and it is the 21st of a month, which means it is giveaway time. And as a matter of fact, Amber, you are the winner of this month's free giveaway, which is a Bigfoot poster, a nice, awesome Bigfoot poster. So, I have emailed you, and it is on the way. What else did I want to say? Oh, yes. For those of you who are subscribed to PacWest Bigfoot and subscribe to the YouTube channel, I want to say thank you so very much for being here and just, being a part of this community and its growth and just enjoying the encounter stories. I put these stories together with real encounters to help people, like myself and even my mother and friends of mine, to really kind of process and kind of come to terms with what we've encountered and what we've experienced when it comes to this animal or creature, Bigfoot. So, that's something I want to do. It's kind of like, like I explained in my About video, the Native Americans used multiple ways to sit there and not only share their unique history, but also share events, through their tribes and their peoples, using things like dance and song and storytelling. And so what I wanted to do was infuse kind of storytelling with real accounts to help people better process and come to understand and deal with what they've encountered or what they've experienced. And so that's why this is all here. So I want to say thank you so very much for being here and following along. All of your, even those of you who are helping me with some of the, giving me some critiques here about the voiceovers and everything else. I want to say thank you so very much for that. I really am taking that to heart as well. And here's the thing, it's December. Merry Christmas. And it is actually the prayer of my family that you guys have a wonderful, wonderful Merry Christmas and also a very Happy New Year. And to those of you trolls following along and leaving your nasty little comments on the YouTube channel, God bless you and Merry Christmas to you too. Seriously, God bless you. Merry Christmas. This week we are going to go ahead and I know that it's already the 21st. You guys are going to be running around like me, like, chickens with their heads cut off for the next couple, 2-3 days. So what I wanted to do is just run this short little encounter story this week because I know you're not going to have a lot of time, but I know that you really like to get your encounter stories in every week. So here is this one. I want to tell you too, this is another real account, and it actually comes from a family member on my wife's side. So here's the deal. Let me get comfortable. And I'm going to tell you this right now. This actually comes from close by as well to where we actually live today. So let's get on with this one. This one is called Teenager Hears and Spots Bigfoot from his backyard in Myrtle Creek, Oregon. The scream was something I've never heard before or since, and what I saw, well, it did not look like a person at all, even from that distance. Besides, I would have probably missed it running across the side of a mountain if it were any smaller. But let me get you up to speed, Dave, of the sighting and the experience itself. Here's my short encounter story of the scream I heard and the Bigfoot I saw run across a mountainside in Myrtle Creek, Oregon, when I was a teenager. The Myrtle Creek Bigfoot. Myrtle Creek is a small town. Growing up here was probably much like that movie Stand By Me, where small town kids usually spent time doing a lot of things outside instead of inside. Personally, when I was 15 years old, I was the luckiest and the richest teenager in town, for a while at least. I had a job with a local television guy, and he paid me pretty well to run up and down a mountain with supplies and help to install antennas. Back then, that's what you did in a far-out place like Myrtle Creek. You put up a larger antenna on the mountain where the signal was great and ran it down to the small town to those who could afford the extra channels. The owner made a small fortune, especially when local channels from Medford became accessible. Either way, I made a good amount of money running supplies up a mountain and running antenna cables back down it for a whole summer that year. Today I live in the same house I did back then. I can see the same mountain today out in my backyard. The same mountain I heard something terrible come from and saw something both terrible and amazing as well. As I said, by the end of that summer I had made a small fortune with the television guy. So much so, I think even some of the parents of friends of mine started questioning their own livelihoods. Just kidding. But it was a lot for those days. I put the money away. I grew up respecting money. And it helped me out down the road, especially today in my retirement. But anyways, back to my story. The mountain behind my house was not exactly right behind it. It was about a mile in back, just beyond the neighborhood I live in. It is a steep mountain with a large flat area at its peak that was covered with coniferous trees. The only real open area was just below the peak, less than halfway down the mountain. Everything but the foot of the mountain is completely visible from my backyard and can be clearly seen when the fog is lifted on a cold morning like the one that day. The day I heard a terrible scream. Getting firewood and a scream. That morning I was getting some firewood in for the day. My dad liked to keep it warm in the mornings for my mom, and trust me, you do not want an Italian woman cold in the morning. You'd hear about that for a decade. I was up at 5:30 a.m. as usual. I got myself dressed for the day, brushed my teeth, and grabbed my gloves, coat, and hat. I was out the door and splitting up some kindling within minutes. I decided that morning to cut up enough kindling to have a jump over the next 2 weeks. After all, I only needed enough wood brought in the house to get it warmed back up. My dad would get more while my brother and I were in school. No, my brother was not out there that morning. It was my turn to get wood in the house. I have heard the horn of elk up on the mountain. I've seen them walk or run across the open area up the side of the old mountain. I've heard a mountain lion at least 3 to 4 times in my life come from up there, and once it was with my dad while unloading wood one early morning. But what I heard that morning come down from the mountain through the thick of the early morning fog, I could tell you the truth, I thought I was going to have to call the police, as it sounded like a woman or someone apparently being murdered up there. If it were not for my parents not believing me that is what was most likely happening up there when I told them, I would have called the police. But they didn't, and I thought that was a great travesty, at least for the next 3 days, that is. It rattled me. The screams, they were intense. Each one lasted a rather long time, too. I mean, probably up to 15 or so seconds at the time. It was high-pitched screaming that at the same time, well, to me, I swear it sounded like a woman in terrible trouble. I have listened to some of those sounds on YouTube recently that people have recorded of Bigfoot, and I know that some of the not-so-crazy ones are probably real, but there was one from Northern California not too long ago that caught my attention real fast. It came from a father and a son, I believe, and it sounded exactly like what I heard that morning, like a crazy woman being murdered, or even a crazy person just yelling at the top of their lungs. The sounds were not emanating from the top of the mountain either. See, this mountain is a little deceiving. From below it looks as though it comes to a rather semi-blunt top, but it doesn't. The very top of the mountain has a little valley in between 2 smaller buttes. But before you get up that far, well, you go through some thick mess of pine trees and thickets into a large open area the size of a couple 2 or 3 football fields. And then the top consists of a small forest. I would know. I had spent the summer going up and down that mountain. The murderous screams sounded like they came from about halfway up. I find it easier to pinpoint where a sound comes from. When you can't see. Maybe that is why we close our eyes so tightly when we try to listen to something closely. At the time I did. I shut my eyes and just listened closely. That morning was foggy for the millionth day in a row. That is why I knew it was not all the way up at the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain that morning was clear of clouds and fog at that moment. The center to the bottom of it, however, was in a thick shroud. The second scream lasted just as long, but seemed a little more, frantic and crazy, if that were possible. It freaked me out so much I stopped chopping up the kindling and went in to get my dad immediately. Of course, there were no calls to the police that day or even over this matter at all. My dad said it was a mountain lion again, and that was the end of it. However, that was not the end of it. I saw a monster. I am not the only report or story of screaming coming from the hills and mountains surrounding Myrtle Creek. As a matter of fact, there have been many reports through the years, even before the Patterson and Gimlin film. While I did not spend much time the next couple of days wondering about the screaming I had heard on the mountain that morning, it was in the back of my mind. Fortunately, the following 2 days would be my brother's turn for collecting wood, so I had no worries anyways. Thursday came all too soon, however, and that was the day I saw something that changed me. I saw a monster in my backyard. I was on the mountain every day just a couple months ago, for 3 months, and never once did I realize that something like that could be lurking up there. What freaks me out the most was the fact that some days I went it alone carrying supplies up to the top of it. It sent shudders up my spine when I thought about it later. Still, it does today from time to time, to tell you the truth. Once again, I woke up early that morning, got myself ready, and headed out to get the wood for the fire that morning. Oh, and my brother must have overdid it with the kindling. There was none left. I decided I would cut up some extra again, but this time I would stick it under the back part of the tarp, out of his sight. The morning was quiet, for the first time in days, rather clear, no fog that morning, at least not at that point. The sun was just coming up, and the side of the mountain was reflecting the brilliant fall morning sun. I do not know what made me turn and look, but I did. I turned and looked at the mountain. Maybe it was because I could see up there today, and the screaming from the other day, well, just maybe I heard something out of the ordinary again. Maybe I'd hear it again. I never thought I'd actually see something, though. As I stated before, there's a thick forest that covers most of the mountain from top to bottom, except for part of it halfway up, and almost dead center. That area is like a mountain meadow full of wildflowers, tall grass, and so on. This part of the year it is brilliant green because of the rainfall. But it is still barren of trees, and visible from my backyard. Well, you could see someone walking across it if they did. You may not make out if it is a male or a female, or even if they were wearing a hat, but you could make out that it was a person for sure. As a matter of fact, my father said he saw me rather frequently going back and forth during the summer, and he said he could tell it was me. As I stared at the top of the mountain, while my mind was wandering on about the screams heard earlier in the week, at that moment I caught movement crossing from the right of the clearing to the left. It was moving fast, too. It seemed to be in all black, as if wearing some all-over bodysuit. At one point it stopped for the briefest of seconds by a large stump and then took off again. It made it from one side of the clearing to the other faster than I could have, even if I was running as fast as I could for a 15-year-old in great shape. It was tall, too. Later on, a couple weeks later, I would finally get the guts to walk up there with my brother, and standing on a stump, I used him to get a basic measurement of how tall that thing or person was that day. I had him stand up on the stump, and I ran down the hill to get a better look. It had to be at least 7 feet, 8 feet tall to be sure. As I said, I was nearly half a mile or so away from this thing when I viewed it on the mountainside running. But the arms were long, and I could tell as they swung back and forth. They were just long. The way it ran while slightly hunched over, well, it just did not look human-like at all. Nothing about this thing looked human. And just so you know, without obstruction, seeing something and recognizing it from a half mile or even more away is easy for the human eye. Matter of fact, here's a little bit of what I've learned. Human-scale objects are resolvable at extended objects from a distance of just under 2.5 miles. For example, at that distance, we could just be able to make out 2 distinct headlights on a car. And, considering the absolute threshold, the brightness of a candle flame, and the way a glowing object dims according to the square of the distance away from it, vision scientists conclude that one could make out the faint glimmer of a candle flame up to 30 miles away. That's rather awesome to know, and if you have seen something like I had that day from that distance, well, physical science is on your side if you believe you saw this creature or animal as I did. Today in Myrtle Creek. I've retired from a local lumber mill I have been with for decades. I still live and am the owner of the same family home I grew up in as a boy, from which I heard and saw Bigfoot. And yes, not much has changed about the mountain out behind me. As a matter of fact, since my sighting and hearing the screams, there have been around a dozen reports of sounds, screams, and even a couple visual sightings since that day in Myrtle Creek that I've actually heard from residents. What I saw that day was big, black, and moved like lightning across a large open stretch of the field on the side of the mountain. I can't explain it, I can't deny it, and I can't unsee it either. I think about it from time to time today when I am out building something in my new little wood shop on the side of my house where the wood pile used to be. However, after seeing some of the reports here and other places online, I'm glad mine was as far away as it was that day. Otherwise, I might still have nightmares today.